Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be taking a look at takeoff and flight characteristics in the F-15C Eagle for DCS World. This is one of the best starter aircraft that you can really get. It's not a full fidelity module, but it does have all the necessary combat systems and functionality to get you up and running and get you into the groove of how this simulation actually works before you move on to something a little bit more hardcore, like maybe the F-14B Tomcat. So as you can see here, we're cold and dark on the ramp at Batumi, and I'm going to go ahead and do a quick startup here. So we'll take a look at the controls for that. And basically all we're really going to need should be under systems. So there's two ways you can do this. You can either start each engine manually. All the Flaming Cliffs 3 low fidelity aircraft have two engines, so this is going to work across the board for all of them. Or you can also just use engine start and stop. For time's sake, we're just going to use engine start and stop, which by default is right shift and home and right shift and in respectively. And we'll also need left shift and L to turn on our cockpit lights. One thing I will note is that when you try to rearm a Flaming Cliffs 3 aircraft, your canopy must be open and your engines must be completely shut down. So that's not very realistic, but it's the way it's coded in DCS World, so it's kind of something that you have to live with. But Flaming Cliffs 3 aircraft start up fast enough that it's not too big of an issue. Alright. So we've got engine RPMs on the right engine, and now we're just waiting for the left engine. Alright, the left engine is now cranking up. So once it levels off about where the right engine is, we should be good to taxi. And I'm going to go ahead and use right control and C to close the canopy. Our left engine has stabilized, so we're good to go. So I'm just going to apply a half throttle just to get us moving, and then pull it back because that's way more than you need in an aircraft like the F-15C in order to get moved around on the ground safely. Because aircraft do not like being on the ground very much. That's really not their strong suit. They just work on the ground basically, but they're really meant to fly, of course. So that's why you have to be careful ground handling in aircraft. So we're just going to taxi nice, slow, and easy here. Just barely enough throttle because the F-15 has a lot of power. So the F-15 is a 40,000 pound class aircraft. That's about what it weighs in a typical configuration. And its engines produce 25,000 pounds of thrust each in full afterburner. So that totals to 50,000 pounds for a thrust-to-weight ratio of about 1.15, which allows the F-15 to do some really incredible energy stunts, including accelerate in the vertical under the right conditions. And if you're wondering why there's a little bit of a disparity in numbers there, it's because by the time you take into account extra fuel and atmospheric conditions that can affect the output of the engines, it's not going to quite be 50,000 pounds of thrust that you get all the time out of the F-15. However, energy fighting really is the F-15's strong suit, which is something that kind of carried over from the F-4 Phantom. So, in a dogfight, what you'll really want to do is take the F-15 vertical if you can, because that's where it's going to really perform well. In a turning fight, it's easily outclassed by some of the other aircraft in DCS World, like the Su-27 Flanker. Alright, so we're lined up on the runway here. I'm going to press W to apply the wheel brakes and get us to a stop. And then I'm going to apply military power, and we'll do a quick takeoff here. Actually, you know what? Let's just go full burner. And press G to get the gear up. And already you can see the amazing climb performance of the F-15. It's really like nothing else in DCS. Only the F-14B can come close to this. So we just did a takeoff and a complete vertical loop, and now we're headed in the opposite direction. So just making some turns here around on Batumi Airfield. We kind of struggle a little bit in these turns. We're doing alright now, but we do tend to lose energy pretty fast, especially without full burner engaged. So if I apply full burner, we can sustain turns in the F-15 that way, although they will be kind of wide, and you'll have to be careful, because if you start out without full burner applied or something very close to it, then by the time you realize it, it may not be enough, even as much thrust as it is, to get you back that energy that you lost and get your maneuverability back. So the F-15 isn't really a slouch in a turning fight, but it does get outperformed in turns just by some of the more unstable aircraft, or aircraft that use relaxed static stability, like the Su-27 and F-15C. So as you can see here, we're kind of getting low, so I'm going to come out of this turn. We're at kind of a high angle of attack here. I'm only doing this because we've got all the power in the world basically in this F-15, so we don't have to worry too much about stalling out. So we'll go ahead and do another vertical loop here. So that is basically how the F-15 flies. One other thing that you can really use to your advantage is the F-15's blistering speed. It is definitely one of the fastest aircraft in DCS, and it also has one of the highest altitude or highest service ceilings actually in DCS. So here we're going to just accelerate down here on the deck and see how fast we can get to going. The F-15 in real life is rated for Mach 2.5 at the right altitudes. We're never going to hit Mach 2.5 down here on the deck where the air is too dense, but we should be able to get up well over Mach 1. And already things are moving by really, really fast here. And that's why I am down on the deck, to show you just how impressive the F-15 really is, straight line with full burner on. Let's check to see if we are supersonic. And we are. So now we're going to take it up to altitude. The F-15 can readily handle going to about 40,000 feet, which is well above the ceiling of most other aircraft. Only a few aircraft like the F-14B Tomcat can really get up that high and actually function up there. So we're taking it vertical here. This is kind of a steep climb. It's not quite vertical, but we're still going really steep here. Take a look at our altitude. And we are already over 40,000 feet and climbing. We surpassed contrail altitude long ago, if you can see that white contrail back there. And we're just going to come right over the top. So that was really impressive climb out of the F-15. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's go head back to Batumi, and we'll go ahead and land the F-15. And that's about all there will be to it. Of course, this is a low-fidelity aircraft. You can't click anything in the cockpit. You're totally dependent on your keyboard and joystick to actually manipulate the controls in the F-15, but that's okay because it's fairly simplified. So you've got everything that you need to be combat effective, all your radar and missiles and all that kind of good stuff, without having to worry about this bunch of switches that is actually modeled down here and what all that stuff does. A lot of that is communication stuff and emergency equipment and numerous other things. So while we're heading back to Batumi, we'll go ahead and give you a quick tour of the cockpit. So over on this side we've got our throttle, bunch of engine controls and such. Up here we have this MFD looking thing. It doesn't actually function in terms of moving, of being able to push the buttons, of course, but this is our SMS page for the F-15. So that will tell you what kind of weapons you have loaded and how many. The F-15 can carry a maximum of 8 missiles, so you've got a lot of firepower on this jet. Then it'll also tell you the status of those weapons. Let's go ahead and pull the throttles back a bit. I'm going to extend the air brake. Make sure that our air brake is up, and it is. The default command for that is B on the keyboard. I actually have it bound to a button on my throttle for easier reach, because in a dogfight that's something that you will need a lot in the F-15, because you can get to going really fast with all this thrust, and if you're not careful you can and will overshoot other aircraft in a dogfight situation. So just up from our SMS page we have our radar here. We've got some instruments down here, artificial horizon, heading indicator, speedo, altitude, and some other instruments here for the engines, engine RPMs, temperatures, and fuel gauge. So we're going to go past the airfield here at Batumi and come in on downwind from the water side of Batumi, or out. We'll get out over the water and then come back to make a landing on the runway.
Bingo fuel. Bingo fuel.
And we're going to have to read this up because we're getting the bingo fuel warning. That is an indication that we don't have a lot left to go. Generally probably have about 5 minutes left. Don't quote me on that though. I'm not terribly familiar with what bingo fuel is in the F-15. Should be something like 5 or 15 minutes, I believe. Get that speed brake down. We're slow enough that we don't need that anymore. Go ahead and extend the gear with keyboard G. That's not something that I would really bind to your HOTAS or joystick, because it's not something that you're going to need except for takeoff and landing, so don't really have to worry about it too much, especially if you have a HOTAS or joystick setup that doesn't have a lot of extra buttons. Go ahead and get our speed brake back out. And I turned in a little bit late, but we should be able to get this lined up and make this work. So we'll pitch up a little bit to slow us down, using hardly any throttle here. And we'll just set it right down on the runway. And that was a bit of a hard landing. I'm not really used to landing in the F-15, but there you go. Go ahead and apply the wheel brakes here. And this is what I was saying about having to be careful ground handling the F-15. I really should have had one hand on the brake and one hand on the nose wheel steering, because we just broke part of our wing off. So that's why you have to be careful ground handling aircraft like this. Alright, so that is all I have to show for this video. I hope you enjoyed that. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you in the next video.
Flight 4 o'clock.